actually no sound check or anything?
That was it. We just did it.
Oh, we did?
Yeah.
Oh, when you do like a more formal.
Thanks for paying attention.
We have to like go through. Well, normally you're
well,
like
when it's
sound
just
check.
when it's just me by myself.
Oh.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway,
Listen,
all right.
I know.
We're actually going. We're
We're going right now. Yeah.
What's up, buddy?
Not much, man.
How's it going, man?
Living the dream.
You want to introduce yourself, or should I introduce yourself?
You can introduce me.
Okay.
I'd like to see
Is
how
he
it
talking
goes.
loud enough? He's got his sexy time voice on.
He does.
Yeah.
He was all screaming before, and
I
now he's
know.
like, "Hey,
Now he's going to his
welcome to the party."
his 1-900 voice.
Late night
I
drive-through.
know.
Yeah.
Hey,
So
make money somehow.
And here we go.
all right. So this is my good friend, right? Everybody. This is Jason Huggins
Mhm.
from Zoë Farms, right?
Yeah.
How long have we known each other?
About 8 or 9 years now.
It's longer than that.
Okay.
It's longer than that.
What?
It's longer than that.
Well,
I don't know why
he
he asks questions.
don't
He already
know.
knows the
Here's
answer.
why. Because I have been married for 12 years. It'll be 13 years this summer.
Okay.
And then how long have you been married?
11. We'll be 11 this summer.
Right. And we met right after you got married?
Yeah, so maybe 11 years.
11
I don't know.
years. That's a long time to know somebody.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And still talk.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Well,
Right?
we'll talk about something.
I'm looking at you because how long have we known each other?
Too long. 5,
Yeah.
7
It's about that time.
to cut off.
Yeah.
Well, luckily for
Yeah.
you, soon enough.
You're
Cliffhanger.
leaving?
I hope so.
Okay.
I need to-
Anyway,
Yeah.
we'll take this podcast on the road.
so Jason's going to talk about his farm. So he just started a farm. I'm just going to do a quick thing,
Mhm.
right? So he just started a farm.
Mhm.
You're probably one of the hardest working people I know because you do a lot of things. So we're going to talk about why you're crazy and you've decided at this point in time to start a farm amongst your other job, which you're a police officer, which we'll gently talk about, and about to have your 5th child,
Right.
which actually may be an asset to you,
Hopefully.
having a farm. Yeah.
Hopefully.
But I think what you're doing is really cool. The type of farm you're doing is really cool. Me coming from a food background, I'm super into it,
Yeah.
right? So again, tell us the name of your farm.
So it's Zoë.
Okay.
Looks like Zoe, but it's actually Zoë Farms.
And what does Zoe mean? It means
So
something.
Zoe is a ancient Greek word for fulfilled life. So one of the things that I'm pretty passionate about is people of anybody being able to have a fulfilled life, full of vigor, going out and conquering the world, doing the things that you want to do, and regardless of what your abilities are. And so when we looked at the name for our farm, for us producing a nutrient-dense food that will help people live a full and vibrant life, and then some of the practices we use, Zoe just seemed to be the right name.
Nice. Yeah. And also just a little bit more background. I mean, Jason and I have spent years sort of volunteering together with, children with special needs and things like that. So I think just hearing the name, the definition, that all makes sense.
Yeah.
So answer just this one question. I know you have your cute little talking points in front of you here, buddy. Why? Like, why start a farm? Why now? I mean, I know there's a lot of reasons. You can get into whichever you want to, but like, why choose? It's not starting a farm is not a career choice you hear a lot of people doing anymore.
Oh, no, not at all. Well,
Certainly not when
there's
you're
a
about
lot
to
of
turn
barriers.
50. Yeah.
There's a lot of barriers
Yeah.
to get into it.
Yeah.
So I am coming to the end of, or nearing the end of my law enforcement career. I've been a police officer in the state of Maryland for almost 23 years now. And I'm getting towards the end of that and still fairly young. So I'm looking at what the next steps are going to be. Not an office kind of person. So, obviously, like you said, I've got a 5th kid on the way. So it's not like I can just, go on vacation, hit the beach, and do nothing for the rest of my life. But farming's really, agriculture, growing our own food has been something that I've been interested in for years. So when we moved to the property we're on now, which it's 2013, it was, kind of a plan. We raised our own pork for a while.
Which was delicious, by the way.
Was it really?
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when we adopted Nolan, who is will be our middle child, back in 2016.
Was it that long ago?
Well, he's
What are we? We're 21 now,
he's
right?
4, getting ready to go on 5.
Jeez, wow. Yeah,
2016.
Okay.
Yeah, when you have 5 kids,
Yeah.
you don't worry about date of birth. It's like,
Yeah.
whatever.
You need to keep,
It's the one between the big one and the little
you
one.
need to keep a
Like,
spreadsheet.
I probably should.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we got out of the farming business out of the farming in general when we adopted him. So Nolan has Down syndrome,
Right.
As you know, and we just had to concentrate on him at that point in time. So we got out of the business. He's now a little bit older. Things seem to be settled. And one of the big reasons that we chose farming is, besides the love of it and wanting to produce our own food and be more healthy, is we also want to be able to give that opportunity, the farming opportunity, to people with differing abilities. So one of our goals down the road is to be able to have employees on the farm that have differing abilities, whether that be Down syndrome, autism, physical disabilities, anything like that. Like, you know, it's really easy, as we've seen, for people to go out, you know, if you're an able-bodied person, you can go out and get your job and life's good. As you and I have done different things in the past, you know, are working with Helping Up Mission and stuff. Like, when people get whether it's a criminal background or a disability or anything like that, it becomes really difficult for them. And we want to kind of break through that. You know, I guess the best way to put it is, I'm thinking about having marginalized communities make awesome nutrient-dense food for all the people that have marginalized them.
Right.
Kind of like hey, here's your punch in the face.
Nice.
Kind of
Yeah. I mean, it's an opportunity for, you know, people from all walks and all backgrounds, right? It doesn't really matter why it's hard for you to find employment. It's just that the fact that it's hard.
Yeah.
So here's an opportunity to do something, you know, fulfillment. You know, it's honest work. I mean, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
I came out to help you. Me and a few friends came out to help you.
Yeah.
We
That's
came
what
out
you want to call it. Yeah.
Well, I was going to get to that.
You
We were
came out to
there
hang
for.
out and you made them.
I think we were there for 5 hours. We got 3/4 of something done, and I think we left him with more work
Yeah.
than we got there.
Was it 3/4 of a bottle of bourbon? Is that what you got done?
No,
No,
actually,
we
were
only
pretty
drank
good.
one beer,
Okay.
and we made him make us lunch. I think he had to
Well-
sacrifice one of his chickens on the farm to
we
make
did.
us lunch, and we did not complete what he asked us to do.
That's
I mean, that sounds about right.
Uh-huh.
I think the mission, everything you just, like, I'm just hearing about this for the first time. It really, and knowing you for a little bit, sort of really fits true to your character, I think, which is awesome. And again, just being a police officer in general says something about you, and then doing this for communities who have been historically disenfranchised, I think is really cool. Starting a farm, there has to be some sort of regulation and permitting process. Like, can you go into how hard is it to actually start this? You know, it seems like there's a barrier to entry that's pretty steep.
Well, besides and you guys know this better than I do, in the real estate world, the price of land is extremely expensive. We are blessed to have a small piece of property, which we already have, that will allow us to start working on this. But yeah, we deal with the USDA, the FISA, the food safety group for the federal government. One of the other big barriers that we run into is processing. So processing pork, processing beef. We have a really good relationship with Gavinell Meats up in Conowingo that does our processing of our pork. But for poultry, being in Purdue's backyard, it's very difficult to find a poultry processor. In fact, there are none in the state of Maryland that I can take, 100 chickens to every month, and they'll process them for me. If I wanted to work for Purdue, I could, on my little piece of property, I could build a confined or a concentrated agricultural or animal feeding operation, or a CAFO. So I built a big barn. I put 25,000 chickens in it. I spend $1 million, get the loan, build that, go into contract with Purdue or Montier out in the Eastern Shore, and they'll provide me the birds, they'll provide me the feed, and every 10 weeks I get a new 25,000 chicks in there, and I throw them through and feed them out. Obviously, $1 million is a pretty hefty loan payment to get, and it's just not in it's not the model we want to be in.
Sure.
I'll never put down any farmer out there. If you're feeding the world, you're feeding the world. There's just different ways of doing it. I mean, I'm sure it's the same in every business. But we do have quite a few regulations. We have to be inspected by the state for our eggs. It's a voluntary program, but then we do all our own processing. So our chicken is processed under an exemption. So we have the ability to process up to 20,000 birds on our property that we grow a year and sell in retail without a USDA inspection, but they have to be sold in state. So I can't sell to Pennsylvania. I can't take them to a restaurant in DC, move to Virginia, anything like that. After that, it has to be USDA inspected. So we have to apply for a USDA inspection, which means that we'd build the processing plant, whatever that may be, and then we would have to have a USDA inspector on the property. They do an antemortem check of the birds, everything's good. Then they watch us as we go through the process, make sure we do everything sanitary. So we start getting into much more of the bureaucracy behind it. Obviously, we're just starting out; we're not there yet, but it is things that we need to take into consideration for the future. It's also one of the barriers for entry into whether it be pastured poultry or pastured pork for anybody, is trying to find that processor. So there's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah,
it's constantly learning.
It's a web. So take us through, and I know part of the process for you is trying to figure all these different pieces out, especially in this very certain way you want to do it. So talk to us a little bit in depth about, you've used the term with me and we've talked in private about the regenerative farming.
Right.
Talk to us about that. Like, tell people kind of what that means.
So regenerative farming is essentially we are regenerating the soil. So a lot of the current farming is input. We plow, we get all the microorganisms that are in the soil, we plow them over, they die, we put synthetic fertilizer. Actually first we put synthetic herbicides down to kill everything. Then we plant new seeds, and it's all genetically modified so that we can plant a seed and then spray Roundup over top of it. Right. And the Roundup resistant seed will continue to grow, but all the vegetation won't. And through that, we've just degraded the soil to the point where we get soil compaction. We don't have the water infiltration. And you can see that. I mean, you could go down past any farm, or after it rains, we go out on the bay on a boat, and you see the soil, the dirt at that point, the dirt just running into the bay. And the reason for that is, and again, not bashing any type of farming that's out there, is that we have just degraded the soil so much because of the way we farm. Maryland is a no-till. A majority of Maryland, if not all of it, is no-till now, but we're still using tons of synthetic inputs in. So in regenerative farming, we don't use any of that. We're going back to the way that the earth was, when the buffalo roamed. And so we're taking large amounts of animal pressure in a small space for a short period of time, moving them. So if you think about the buffalo, if you ever watch an old Western movie, you got these thousands of buffalo. They run, they eat, they crap, they trample everything down, and then they move to the next section. And they may not come back to that section that they were just on for a year. Right. And so all that input goes back into the soil by the trampling and just the weight of the animal. You're breaking down the fibers in the grasses. They die, fertilizes soil. It's all natural. We're not putting any inputs back into the soil. So through regenerative, we're taking the animals that we raise, we're moving them daily. So our chickens, just because of the predators that we have a lot of foxes, coyotes, hawks. We put them in what we call a chicken tractor. So it's a 10 by 12 by 2 foot tall, or some of them are hooped pen. It's a floorless pen. We'll pack 80 birds in it so that they're nice and confined. They have their water, they have their supplemental non-GMO, non-soy feed, and then they move to a fresh piece of ground every day. So unlike a CAFO system where they get that 1 square foot per bird per the size of the building, maybe never seeing the light of day, ours are moved to fresh ground every day, as opposed
to daily. Interesting. Okay.
And depending on the growing season, if we were to hit a drought, we'll move them twice a day. Okay. It all depends on how much pressure they're putting on the ground. Right. And then we like to have at least 45 days before they touch that ground again.
Interesting.
The 45 days, it gives us an opportunity for any of the organisms that, whether it be worms, as in worms that would be detrimental to the chickens, any of the parasites, stuff like that, they will die off because they won't have a host in that 45 days. Okay. So it allows us not to have to give antibiotics, not to have to give dewormers and stuff like that, because we're moving them off of that parasite load. So the most time that our birds spend confined in one area would be the brooder, which is the start of their life. So we pick up our birds. We get them from Pennsylvania. We pick them up. They come to us the day after they're born. They need to be kept at about 95, 96 degrees for the first week, and then we start weaning them off of it. So they will stay in the brooder. We use a deep bedding system. So we don't actually, it's not a concrete floor. We put down about 6 inches of usually pine shavings. The chicks go on it, and then every day we add pine shavings on top of the feces and everything that's in there to cover it up, which also begins to start an anaerobic process where we break that down, just like composting. It does a couple things for us, and this time of year it starts to provide a little bit of heat as it composts the manure and the urine, and we just continue to build that up. And then once they're out, which is generally about 3 weeks, this time of year, it's because of the weather, it'll be a little bit longer for our laying hens. Then we will pull all that out and we start all fresh. They start in the brooder. They go from the brooder to the chicken tractor. Then they get moved daily. We raise 2 types of bird. We raise a Cornish cross, which is what everybody sees in the grocery store. The double-breasted, larger, 4 or 5 pound, maybe even 5, 6 pound bird. These are conventional birds that were built may be the bad word, but were bred for confinement farming.
Gotcha.
And the problems that is seen in the confinement sector is because these birds are designed to grow super fast. A lot of times they will outgrow their bone growth.
Right.
So their legs will break because they become too heavy because their bones haven't. You're talking about a bird that goes from hatching in the egg to the slaughterhouse in 7 to 8 weeks.
It's so fast.
Jeez.
So we take those. So we do raise those. Ours we generally raise. It's usually about 9 weeks because they're on pasture. We find that raising them slightly slower. They still have access to the food. So chickens they're not a grain only animal. They're omnivores. So they like eating bugs and insects and everything else that's out there. So by allowing them to do that in a pastured setting, they're acting more like they're supposed to, as opposed to solely being fed cheap corn or cheap soy in order to build them up. It's why studies show that pasture-raised poultry is so much more nutrient dense.
Right.
And it's just a better bird. But with that comes cost, because I'm now going from 8 weeks and a single building to daily moves, 10 weeks, 2 extra weeks of food, extra labor. And then we also raise what's called a Freedom Ranger, which is it's a slower growing bird, single-breasted, little darker meat. The fat on our birds tends to be more yellow as opposed to white, just because of everything they're eating. Right. But we're growing them at 11 weeks. So again, we're taking.
Is that a heritage breed?
It's not a heritage breed. It's been bred more for the pastured poultry producers, but it's more along a line of a heritage breed. And so because again we're now talking 11 weeks, so I'm almost for every 2 batches of Freedom Reds Freedom Rangers I can raise, which is a red bird, I could raise 3 groups in a confinement. And we're talking about even in the most advanced pasture poultry, where we're using a 16 by 40 chicken tractor and we're running 500 birds at a time, I'm still not running, I'm still not at a 25,000, or, in a 6-acre piece of property, I can put 4 confinement houses.
Right.
So when we get into that economy of scale, it's why, it costs $5.99 a pound for my bird.
Right. And
you can go down to Costco and get one for $1.99.
Well, and also too, I remember back in my food days, I remember reading Michael Pollan's book, who I think I don't know if we want to call him the godfather of this. He certainly, this is
he brought it to light. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a style of farm that's been around forever, but he certainly brought it to the mainstream. But I remember a quote from, I think it was maybe The Omnivore's Dilemma, his book, and he said this style of farming, you're really not raising animals, you're really growing grass.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, there's so much more effort and attention and cost that goes into the field itself than the animal, because the animal's going to do what the animal's going to do, right? They're just going to behave in their natural way.
Right.
But the farmer's job is to make sure that the field is ready for them
Absolutely.
in the most natural way possible, which takes a lot of time and effort and just costs more because your labor is really expensive, you know?
Well, we're looking at, we grow native grasses.
Right.
It's not, I don't go to, Home Depot and buy a 50-pound bag of Kentucky bluegrass and throw it down and go, oh, yeah, I got green grass. We're not trying to grow a lawn.
Right.
So we deal with a lot of clover, a lot of Sudan grass, hairy vetch, other types of natural grasses from Maryland, just because of where we are. If we go to Pennsylvania, I might have some different grasses. If I go to the Midwest, I'm going to have even different grasses.
Sure.
So it's really knowing exactly what grows well in your soil, and being able to get all that input in a non-synthetic way into your soil to grow out your soil. We'll put radishes and turnips in order to add nitrogen back into the soil.
Nice.
And then on top of it, the flip side of it is we have to make sure that there becomes a balance where you can have too much nitrogen going into the soil. So when we get too much nitrogen going into the soil, meaning we've run the animals over that piece of ground too much in a year, well, now that nitrogen has to go somewhere. So it's
the
either
nitrogen is coming from waste?
It's coming from the waste of the animal, or depending on what seed version we happen to plant. If we planted a high nitrogen producing seed, then we have to balance all that to make sure that the object is to have a balance and keep it all in the soil as opposed to running off.
Gotcha.
The science behind this is
it's
amazing.
Really interesting.
Yeah, like I don't know anything about this, hence why I'm being quiet most of the time, which is good for everybody. But hearing how much energy goes into this, it really does justify the additional cost. You are getting a more nutritious product, more sustainable farm. It's better for the human consuming it. It's better for the animal. It's better for the earth. Like that's just something that I think most people don't consider when they go to Safeway. Yeah. And it's the $1.99, not to yell at Purdue, but like that's the only mass one I can think of. It doesn't seem as sustainable as what you're doing.
Well, it is the sustainability. The other thing is when you look at a local pasture-based product, the price tag is the price tag. Mm-hmm. So I sell you a chicken for $5.99 a pound. That's all the input. It's everything. When you go to Costco or Safeway or anywhere, any grocery store, and you buy a chicken and you see the $1.99, what you're not seeing is the $2.99 of taxpayer subsidies that went into the corn, which allowed the prices to be lower. You're not seeing the tens to $20,000 after that in healthcare issues, because now we've taken a non-nutrient filled product, we've sold it as a food. People eat it because they're like, oh, hey, I went and got I'm eating chicken. I'm eating healthy chicken. Everybody says it's healthy. I'm eating this white chicken breast that, I paid $1.09, but there's no nutrients in it. It's deficient in vitamin D. It's deficient in vitamin A. It has much higher saturated fat. So when you look at the costs on the back end, I'd venture to say that most of your pasture-based poultry products or any of your pasture-based products are cheaper in the long run.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's just we put it on our price tag and people go, whoa, wait a minute, I can go do this. Well, I don't take a subsidy. I drive to Clear Spring to pick up my feed from a 7th generation farmer who does non-GMO, non-soy organic feed in his field. So I get that feed and it's the place where I get it. I could go down to Tractor Supply, and instead of spending $18 a bag on feed, I could buy a bag of feed for $6, right, and I could sell you a $1.99 chicken, but it wouldn't have the nutrients in it. And then one of the big things we want to get past, and we've seen with COVID, and you and I have talked about this, like you hear the stories, more marginalized groups or, the black and brown communities, they're more affected by COVID. Well, yeah, I'm sure there are, because as we've seen throughout history, there's a lot of other social issues that go into those neighborhoods where, take Baltimore. 1 in 4 people in Baltimore lives in a food desert. Food desert by the USDA is you have to go more than a quarter mile to get to an actual grocery store. think about, I mean, you guys work in Baltimore. We've all driven through Baltimore. Think about the communities that don't have access to a grocery store. They're getting their food from the corner store, from the mom and pop store. Again, nothing against any of those stores that are providing that food. I mean, that's where they get their food. But if you go in there and your option is, a bag of Doritos for 99 cents or, a bag of carrots for $5, like, I mean,
it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. I mean, we all have to budget ourselves, and you look at what the money you have. And so one of the things that we want to do is we want to put that food into those communities. And one of the things that we want to do is we have a goal in the next 5 years. We have found some vacant, marginalized property in Baltimore City, and we want to build livestock farms on it. But we don't want to build a lot. Like, I don't want to come in and be like, hey, this is really cheap property. I'm going to come and make good. I want to go in. I want to build a farm on the property. I want to bring the community into that. I want to teach the community how to farm that property, how to raise livestock. Yeah, people, there's a lot of gardens. They're doing a lot of vegetable gardening. I'm sure people will argue with me. I'm a livestock farmer. You can't sustain life on just vegetables. There's a vegan out there that's like losing their mind in a car right now.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah. But, if we can, there's a lot of, as you brought up earlier, there's a lot of bureaucratic hurdles we have to get over. Yeah. So if there's anybody from the city council that wants to give me a call. We can talk about this. But, we can put this food into the hands of the people that need it. And I think we can do it at scale. I think we can do it at a price that is achievable. Obviously, I can't expect anyone who's, unemployed on food stamps to buy a $5.99 chicken. It's not going to happen. I don't expect that.
Right.
But we had a lot of people in this area that are living well above the poverty line that, hey, if you buy a $5.99 chicken, that allows me to produce more chickens and either donate those chickens. One of the things we've done on our website is we have a donation package. You can actually purchase 6 birds and we will donate it, and you get the tax write-off. So what we've done is we're like, hey, this is a partnership. You, as the consumer, you buy this package, you pay for the feed, the cost of the bird, all the inputs. We cover the labor and the processing. And when it's done, we donate it to, we have a couple groups that we're working with. We donate the bird to them, and then we cut a receipt to the consumer for the tax purposes. So when we looked at this, when we started this business, we were really, it took us a while. I mean, Quincy can tell you this. It took us a while to decide nonprofit versus profit. And what it really came down to is it's a quote from Mike Rowe. He said it in one of his shows where he was talking about, nonprofits are great. It's great to go into an inner city with a nonprofit and go, hey, we're here to help you. He goes, but how much better would it be to go in and show someone that they can run a profitable business, and teach them how to run a profitable business to help them from wherever they are, whatever the situation is. This is kind of the model we took. And, so there's a lot of things we have in store for the future, a lot of really big ideas.
Yeah. Sort of that teach a man to fish mentality.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And getting, and I think, when we talk about regenerative farming is we can take these marginalized piece of property in the city that aren't going to be used for anything else.
Right.
And we can take the years of industrial degradation and we can regenerate that just by putting animals on it, bringing in some feed, and it's definitely not going to be an overnight thing, but we would love to be able to do it here in Baltimore. And then we'd love to be able to take it to a lot of different places, and really just produce this model throughout the country.
I mean, it definitely doesn't sound easy. That's not what I mean, but it sounds like a no-brainer. Like, we have all these vacant lots in the city. We have all these row homes that are nothing but falling down. Whole entire blocks in some sections of the city. Why not do this? Like, it doesn't. What are sort of the objections that? Have you talked to anybody?
Right, and we also have a dwindling population in our city.
Sure.
So, I mean, there's been a long-standing plan to reduce the housing the physical structure in the city because it's too much for the population we currently have. So what else are we going to do with the vacant land?
Yeah.
Just sit there, right?
What objections are you
Well,
running
so
into?
really, it's not as much objections; it's current law. So
Okay.
currently, you can't raise livestock within the city limits. You can't commercially. So you can have, I think, you can have like 1 or 2 goats. You can have a couple chickens. You
Right.
can't have any roosters. And a lot of that, I think, comes from if you go online and you're a policymaker and you go online and you type in livestock raising, well, you see these huge confinement
It looks
facilities.
terrible. Yeah.
And you go, well, we don't want that there. We don't want this manure. You go down to, look at any of the controversy in South Carolina where you have these huge farms and they're the hog farms and they're producing waste, and the liquid waste is then being sprayed on fields and being sent into the air, and there's lawsuits and all this. I can see why a policymaker goes, hey, we just don't want this.
Mm-hmm.
But regenerative farming is not like that. The object is when you walk on our farm, the object is for you to go, wait a minute, you raise pigs here?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, I don't smell the pigs. Well, you're not going to smell the pigs because we don't leave them in one area long enough for them to create the odor by having overwhelming amounts of manure. So leave them in an area, they go to the bathroom, they walk in it, pushes it down into the soil, they move to the next section. Within a couple days, we're sprouting new growth on that piece of property, even in our woods. So we raise our pork a majority of the time in the woods. It's a natural habitat for them. They get, we have a bunch of oak trees, so they're getting all the acorns. They're eating all the nuts. They're digging all the grubs. They're just getting all this nutrients that they're getting. They're also have access to a non-GMO soy free feed that allows them to grow out. It's not like we just throw them out there and go, hey, fend for yourself. We'll be
Right.
back in a couple years. But we move them, and that's the whole key to this is being able, as long as we pay attention to how we're impacting the ground, we can move them without the odor.
Wow.
And I can tell you, when we raised our first set of hogs back in 2014, and we just threw them out like, hey, go to town. Here's your feed. And they destroyed some of our pastures. We learned that, hey, you got to have fences that don't have 24 on center post because a hog will just push through no matter how much electric going through them. So, we've adjusted our plan. And in some of those times you would get, they'd dig a wallow and then you'd be like, wow, there's this big stinky hole right there. Well, and then we learned, well, if we move them before they get to that point, they'll still dig holes. They'll still have wallows. They'll still be pigs. And that's the really cool thing about it is we're allowing them to be pigs.
Right.
We don't dock tails. Excuse me. We don't dock tails. We don't, and docking tails came from the confinement world because the pigs would get bored and they would start chewing on the tails of the other pigs.
Jeez.
And what would happen is, they're, I don't want to say they're predators, but they're meat eaters. And so you now get a injured pig that's bleeding and the other pigs would eat it. And so obviously it kind of cuts on the bottom line when your pigs are eating your other pigs, and it's really hard to sell to a customer like, hey, this pig ate his brother, but everything's good.
Yeah.
Extra porky.
So we can eliminate a lot of those just by the process.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, like if you think of industrial farming or large agricultural farming, and I have friends that do it, and again, I don't knock any of it whatsoever. They're still producing tons of food, feeding the world. It's awesome. But these are guys that they buy their seed, they put their seed in the ground, they use a big tractor to go and plant the seed. Then like they'll take from their dairy operation, they'll put all their manure in a tractor and a manure spreader, and then they take it to the field and they do all this stuff while the cows, and I'm like, well, you have a cow that's designed to put the manure, like if you just leave it in the field, it'll put it in the field for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't have to do anything. So we can cut back on diesel inputs. We can cut back on exhaust. We can cut back on the methane. We talk about methane in the farming world as this bad thing. Well, if you've ever Googled a feedlot or you've ever driven down a highway in the Midwest, there are feedlots where they put, it's the same concept with cows and chickens in a house, except for this is just steers on a big paddock. And you'll see mounds, and that mounds is the manure. Well, that methane has to go somewhere. If it's just sitting in a pile and not being absorbed down into the soil, that's when we get the methane release into the atmosphere. Well, if I take it right from the source, right to the ground, I eliminate a lot of that pile, all that stuff just goes right into the ground. So in the system, I can cut out some of the input and the labor that it takes to take it from farm A to farm B to spread it on a field. And if grain's a little different, when we start talking about like grass-fed beef and grass-fed lamb, it's really easy because, they were created to eat grass.
Right.
So now I don't have to go, there's no other feed input. It's like I put you in this field, I move you to fresh feed, like you do everything right here, as opposed to I cut down a bunch of corn, which your stomach is not really designed to process, and I put you on a big pad with hundreds or thousands of other animals, and I feed you this corn, so you get fat, and I get this nice marbled steak, which looks awesome, and that's what you go to any Outback or anything, that's what you're used to, but we're looking at a very, it's not a nutrient-dense food.
Right.
It's not healthy.
I want to back up a second. I have like 13 questions to ask. So I want to back up to the economics of things. So you were talking about how, the price per pound of like a chicken, for instance, obviously is way more expensive. Well, not way more expensive, but more expensive. Mm-hmm. What I think is interesting, especially during COVID, I think everybody has now become so obsessed with like buying local stuff and things like that. But I just want to go knowing you for a while now, I know you don't do anything for the purpose of becoming rich, right? So the economics, however, I guess the question is, don't you think that the food you're producing in this style now is essentially how food will, do you think that the current commercial farming model is sustainable 20, 30, 50 years out?
No.
And don't you kind of see that like the inroads of the bigger companies buying out these smaller companies like we talked a couple weeks ago? I mean, don't you kind of see like the writing on the wall is like, it seems expensive now, but like I'm not bragging, but like I've been buying food like this forever, I feel like. So to me, I'm like, this is just how much food should cost. Right. Like, we use these words expensive, cheap, but I'm like, but this is how much food should cost. Because like you said, there's all these hidden costs that you don't see, but I don't know. I don't think it's sustainable. The commercial model, I don't think is sustainable.
I don't think the commercial model is sustainable. Right. I think there's a couple things at play. One, as we saw with COVID and the processing plants. Mm-hmm. Like when you shut down a processing plant that is responsible for processing 30% of all the pork in the country for 2 weeks, like what do you do? I met with our butcher actually last week, and they're booked 2 weeks out or 2 years out because of COVID. Like, and that's one of the problems we have. It's difficult to get into the processing world. As we were talking about, one of the barriers is where is this processing taking place? But between the agricultural inputs, at some point in time, and I'm sure there's a scientist that will argue with me somewhere, but at some point in time, we are going to modify ourselves out of the food that we are creating, because we are constantly, there's new bacteria, there's new diseases that are coming up that we're modifying, or there's new weeds that we're already seeing weeds that are resistant to glyphosate, which is essentially Roundup. Like we're seeing weeds that are resistant to that. So the next thing is we have to create another chemical which will take care of those. And eventually we're going to science our way out of sustainable food.
Yeah, I hate when you talk to people who aren't into food and they're like, oh, eventually food would just be, in pellets or something. I'm like, that's horrible. Like that sounds like
there's still an enjoyable concept.
And then the other thing too is like I think people need to take a lot more pride in buying, like knowing where anything you buy, people need to take a lot more pride in just like knowing where it comes from, or being able to like have a conversation or reach out and shake the hand of the person that they're buying it from or that's made it or produced it. I just don't, like, people just don't care about that enough anymore.
I saw it was a post somewhere, and I'm not exactly sure who to attribute it to, but they were like, your doctor, your pharmacist, but you don't know your farmer.
Right.
And, anyone's welcome to come to our farm anytime. Right. I can't guarantee that it'll be the cleanest place or that you're going to walk in and go, wow, this is the nicest place in the world. It's a working farm.
Right.
There's stuff moving around all the time. And I got 5 kids. I mean, who knows? They could be destroying the place while I'm sitting here.
Right.
That is what it is. But, I do believe that it is important to know your farmer. I mean, you know me, I'm not exactly a extrovert. Like I've come.
I'm shocked we even have you here right now.
Yeah.
Right.
But I feel important. Like to me, I have a passion in this, and it's important for me to be able to get this out to people that, that is something we need. And a farmer, it's there. There's a lot of people that look at a farmer and they're like, oh, that's the backwoods guy that, drives the pickup truck. And, there's a lot of science that goes into it.
You do drive a pickup truck.
I do drive a pickup
Right.
truck.
We commented as he drove in the park.
It's a very large
it's a
pickup
big
truck.
truck.
Yeah.
I know. I had to drive around because, you only have one way in, one way out in this parking lot.
Going back to like knowing your farmer and knowing where things come from. So my wife and I can't think of the name of the farm. She found it. We order, I think it's once a quarter. We get some from a local farm, some pork, 2 chickens, some local beef.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to support local, right? Obviously, I'm learning about you now. I didn't know any of this, which is fascinating.
Okay.
So now we're going to talk to you after. Do you have anything like that? Like, can we get on a quarterly delivery? Can anybody get on a quarterly delivery? And I screwed that word up huge. Delivery. Something like that.
Yeah.
And order stuff and have it picked up or delivered?
In the future, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right now. So, again, we started in January.
Yeah.
We did a lot of research into the farm businesses before we started. Obviously, being a cop, you don't have to really know marketing very well. It's like you just show up, you deal with the problem, you go away, everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. But in looking at the marketing, one of the things that I discovered, or I think maybe I've discovered, is the branding part. So we've really put a lot of emphasis into our branding in the beginning. I went back and forth, like, do we launch the business before we have product? And I'm like, it was really hard for me to decide what to do. And so we chose that we'd launch in January, and you can pre-order wholes and halves of the hogs. You can pre-order chickens. But right now, like I don't have, we will get our first set of broilers in the middle of March.
Okay.
And then they'll be processed in June. So in June will be the first time that I can actually go like, hey, here's a chicken.
Yeah.
Have a chicken. You can. So our goal is, yes, to have a pork and a chicken. Some people call it CSA, community supported agriculture, or a subscription. I think it's all the way you word it.
Right.
But yes, in the future, we will have that product. And some things will be different, whether it'll be, in the summertime. One of the things we're looking at doing is a good amount of like sausage, just because we go out on the boat, or you hang out at parties. Like, so I know that our products will change based off of the season. But yes, that is one of the things in our future. We just don't have it.
Yeah, that's
I
awesome.
don't have anything to give you, so I can't or sell you.
So you can't yell at me. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is something that we consciously try to do. But again, I think it goes back to what we initially started. We're luckily in a financial position to be able to do that, to where we can almost that pay it forward, right? Like help support a local farmer who helps support people who aren't as fortunate to be in the position that we are.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one of the things that we enjoy, and it just tastes better too. Like I know you from your chef, like it tastes 100% better.
I literally I mean, just to be blunt, I shit on people. Like, I mean, I have no problem. I will show up to somebody's house, and if when they if somebody, this is why people don't invite me over to their house for dinner. I show up and I go, "What is this? Where's it from? That's disgusting. I'm not eating it."
Yeah,
that's it. Giant. I'm not going to eat it.
Do you believe him that that's the only reason people don't invite him over for dinner?
No.
Okay, just throwing it out
I'm
there.
sure it has a lot to do with it, but yeah, it's not the only reason.
It's his overall personality.
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
I'm a delight.
You are.
Anyway,
You're a delicacy. You're like a fine wine.
Okay, that just got weird.
there's so many things I want to say that cannot be said with
Why?
this microphone
I feel like
dangling in front of my mouth.
You say that every podcaster. Like, I want to say something,
Yeah.
but I can't.
Anyway,
back to the real world.
back to serious. I want to go back. So you were talking about this plan you have to use vacant lots in the city to kind of further the farm operation. I want to ask this: is there a plan, or if there's not a plan, just in general, how do you? Because again, like farming is not something you see people just being like, I'm going to be a farmer. You don't even hear kids growing up being like, maybe your kids do, but most kids don't. So like, do you think that reaching out into the city, or let's just call it urban areas in general, do you think that you can use that to sort of like help motivate new generations of kids to, because I think the other danger with the food chain is we're going to run out of producers.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
so the statistics show that most, I think it's something like 80% of all farmers are 60 years and older.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason is our tax base is designed that if, as a landowner, family farmer, if you don't plan ahead to essentially give away all your business and your property before you reach a certain age, then the tax base is the point where or the tax cost is so prohibitive that your kids can't take over the farm. And then we get a lot of kids that don't want to come back to the farm. Right. And so we are running into that issue. I mean, really, as corny as it sounds, it's making farming cool. Like,
right.
I mean, there's just something cool about, going out in the freezing cold to check on the chickens to make sure that, the brooder's the right temperature. I mean, I'll be completely honest. We bought it in February because in order to get our laying chickens up to the point we wanted them in June to be producing eggs, we had to get them extra early this year. Generally, we wouldn't bring chicks onto the farm in this cold weather, but we brought them in February. It is what it is. As you know, you guys came over and tried to help me with the one brooder.
Is that we were building a brooder?
Yeah, you guys worked for 5 hours and 3/4 of a brooder that I built the same one in 2 hours by myself. But that's
part of that. We had this guy helping us, a guy named Ben, great guy. There were two Bens, Big Ben and Medium Ben, and Medium Ben can't read numbers or do math very well, or cut a straight line.
Sure.
One of the straight line.
And so we had Big Ben, who's probably the most skilled amateur carpenter. He would measure because that was the most important job.
Right.
And you should be able to cut a piece of ply. We would give it to Medium Ben, 3 inches short, and just I don't know what he would do. Every single cut. You probably had to rebuy all ply. I mean, we wasted so much plywood.
I don't know.
That day.
I had to go do electrical work so that you guys could.
I noticed you were like, I'm going to do this solitary job while you idiots do this job.
The job that'll burn the place down if you get it wrong.
But yeah, so we brought 113 chicks on the farm, and we expect about 10% mortality with everything. It's just the way it is. And in a 3-day period, we lost 32 of them. Yeah. And really, when we've looked back at it and analyzed it, it was a brooder management problem. Where when we brought them back, the best we can surmise is these birds got on the outside of. So we use heat lamps in the brooder, and they were just on the outside, but because they were cold, they didn't eat, they didn't progress, and so they failed to thrive and they died. And I mean, take all the monetary value out of it. Like, you bring this animal into your farm, you're like, hey, I'm gonna bring you onto my farm, I'm gonna take care of you, even if it is to kill you later down the line and make you a delicious meal. Like, I'm bringing you on the farm, like I have a duty to take care of them, and these things were dying. I mean, we had like 6, and you wake up and the next morning there's 12, and you're like, what the heck did I do wrong? And trying to figure this out. So, we deal with a lot of those issues as farmers. And the one thing that's really cool about it as well is like trying to figure that out. It's not, farming is not this, I go out in the field and I get on a tractor, I drive around in circles, and like there's so much more that goes into it. There's so much of your brain that you have to use. It's very creative. It's a very hands-on job. I mean, I became a cop probably because I couldn't physically sit in one place for more than 10 minutes at a time.
No, that's a firefighter.
Huh?
That's a firefighter.
Oh no, they're great at sitting for long periods of time.
That's what I mean. Yeah. If you want to sit in one place, you become a firefighter.
Yeah.
So I hear. I don't know. Yeah. That's what I heard.
Sleep at night. Yeah. I mean, now had I scored like 5 points higher on the test, I probably could have been a firefighter. But
see, that's not fair. You're taking my only ammo.
And here we go.
Yep. I had to take it.
See, that's some bullshit.
So I had a plan this entire time just to instigate a fight. Between you two.
I'm not fighting anybody. We'll just zoom in on my helmet up there, and he'll just be cut out of the entire podcast.
Yeah. No.
We love and respect our police brethren in the fire department.
We're all the same. It's
we all get shit on. It doesn't matter.
As someone once said, all young cops, or how's it go? All young firemen want to be cops, and all old cops want to be firemen. If they would pay me to sleep at night, I'd be like, Abso-freaking-lutely.
What a backhanded compliment.
When I get old and tired after working my entire life.
If
Yeah,
I could get
see?
paid to go to work and sleep in a cot, I would do that all day long.
Listen, I can't even argue with you. Like, the city's one thing, right?
Yeah.
But my first day at the fire academy, they give you a pillowcase and sheets. How,
Don't they do that in
how
jail
bad can the
too?
job be? Like, well, there's a point we can make that it was. Anyway, back to you.
So you started. So I want to ask some business questions. So what is harder, the actual farming, like the manual labor? Because I know you love manual labor, seemingly, or the business side of it.
The business side,
I figured that.
hands down.
Talk to us about that.
So it's, I mean, whether it's planning out your growing season. So like I started before we even launched the business in November, December, I'm looking at, okay, well, if it takes 11 weeks to grow out a chicken, then I got to get the chicken, you know, I want to process it on this day. I got to have the chicken by this day, which means I have to order it by this day, and just back scheduling everything. And I mean, I've done some planning of some fairly
Can I
large.
interject for a second?
Yeah.
I would go over to Jay's garage. Like, you know, we just go, especially like during COVID, it was a good outdoor place.
Yeah.
It was somewhat warm. You know, we could go have a drink, and you'd walk in, and they're just, you know, we have whiteboards everywhere
Just
with like indiscernible writing. You're like, well, like,
What
is
are you
he
talking
is he
about?
doing like some hardcore math, or is he playing a business? And I'm like, wow, he's really trying to figure some stuff out here. He's working through some stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the business side of it, cash flow. I mean, again, all these things that I'm really learning for the first time, and you know, cash flow is a huge thing. Like how do you, you know, as a starting farmer, so you've got two choices. You take out a huge loan,
Right.
and you cross your fingers and hope that everything goes well and you can pay everything off. And if it doesn't, then you've, you know, usually used your house and your property as that. And then me and my wife and 5 kids are sitting out on the street corner because of bad decisions. Or do you try and cash flow it yourself? I mean, I have one leg up on most people entering the farming world is I still have a paying job.
Right.
So, you know, now I would love for this to take that over and do this full time, but right now I do it both full time.
Right.
So whether it's the cash flow side, the planning side, marketing, I mean, thank the Lord for my wife. She helped me design the logo, and you know, I had this idea for a logo, and I'm like, hey, I need a logo, and she's like, oh well, you know, we have to have a color scheme and all these things that are way outside of my realm of knowledge. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you just don't like this is what I want it to look like. I can do it on Word. Everything will be fine. And she's like, yeah.
Word?
She's like, no, we don't do that. Yeah, I know. It's a little old school.
Good, man. Chime in.
no.
You want to say something? Your face is so red that you want to say something.
Red.
Don't make it red. It's a color that people of your complexion get.
Yeah. So back to the
Anyway,
business side of it. Yeah.
Do you find it frustrating, or you find it exciting to learn all the business side stuff?
A little of both.
Okay.
So it's exciting. I mean, I love learning new things. I would much rather learn feed conversion for the hog than, you know, marketing schemes for this. But like you were talking, Mark, about like coming up with different ideas of how to give your sell your product to the consumer is, you know, the easiest way is, hey, come buy a whole hog from me.
Right.
And I only have to sell it once, as opposed to, okay, I've got to now cut this hog into retail cuts, and now I've got to store it, and then I've got to get it out to the customer. And do I do farmers markets, which farmers market's great, but a farmers market is your whole day on Saturday, which then means I got to hire somebody to work on the farm, when I'd rather like get people to actually come to the farm. And if you come to the farm, then yeah, there's just so many different facets of it that I kind of knew, but I didn't know when I got into it. So learning that stuff, websites and, you know, point of sale stuff that, again, thank goodness for Allie for jumping in and being like, hey, you know, there's this neat thing. It plugs into your phone. You can take credit card. I'm like, huh? What? Oh, we should get one of those. That's pretty cool. You know, she did all our website stuff. And, you know, so trying to, you know, and then, so you get the business side of it, you got the growing side of it, which is obviously going out and moving them and feeders and different stuff like that. And one of the things that I'm finding here, especially in Maryland, is we are such a production agriculture centered location that like the equipment I need, like, so my hog water, for example, I've got to go all the way to Reading, Pennsylvania to get it.
When you mean like the water the hogs drink?
No.
Oh.
The actual implement they drink out of. So we don't just use buckets.
Gotcha.
Like we have an actual, it's an 80-gallon water. Well, it's either Reading or Winchester, Virginia. Like I can't go, there's no place, I can't even go to Westminster and pick it up. Like they just don't sell the product we're looking for. And a lot of that is because everything is centered towards, put this in your barn. Well, I don't need one that goes in a barn. I need
right.
one that's going to last outside
Right.
with the hogs bouncing up against it. So those type of things. And then just life in general.
Nice.
So
How do you find time to do this?
That's what I was going to ask. How do you find, how do you
Like-
find time? Like, what's the plan to incorporate the kids? Is there a
Well,
plan? I don't know. Maybe
yeah,
just-
I mean, actually, it's
Right.
I mean, it's one of the reasons that I like farming as an idea is that, obviously now I can't take my kids to work with me. Like,
Right.
there's no like, hey, come hang out with dad.
No
for the
ride-along
day.
program.
Yeah, no ride along
Yeah.
program for an 8-year-old.
Right.
It just doesn't work that way. But, being at home, being on the farm, getting them involved. Like I took them to pick up the chicks, and it's kind of been nice with COVID and
right.
distance learning. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
grab your computer, or
Yeah.
don't take your computer, and
Right.
we'll tell mom you did, and we'll just. I do want to involve the kids, but it's very hard.
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
And then there's the other sides of it, like, right, 8 years ago, farming was kind of an outlet. Well, now farming is becoming the business. So,
Interesting, yeah.
so fishing and being on
Right.
the water is the outlet.
Right.
Well, things still need to be fed before you
Right.
can go out on the water. And how does that fall into it? And then, as we've talked, being able to get the people that we work with in the farming industry, whether it's, someone with a disability that's working on the farm, but then getting them into some other outlets, like
Right.
getting them onto the boats and getting them out on the water and incorporating all that in together. And, I mean, you can always sleep when you're dead, right?
Yeah, I used to say that all the time until
Yeah.
I got to my late 30s.
Yeah.
So take us through a typical day. Like, let's assume you don't have to go be a police officer this current day. Take us to a typical farm day.
Oh, so right now it's pretty easy because we only have one set of animals on the farm.
That
so
was
it's-
not the answer I was looking for.
That was,
So
Any aspiring farmers, you heard it from Jason Huggins. It's easy.
yeah. No, I said right now it's easy. So it's get up. First thing we do is we check the brooder because that's where the chicks are right now. So go out, make sure the brooder temperature's good, give them more bedding. It's usually about 15, 20 minutes at the brooder. It's getting pretty efficient.
what time do you start your day?
That all depends.
Yeah.
If I work till 2 a.m. the morning before, it might
Right.
be 8 or 9 o'clock.
Right,
If I had a schedule that I could work with that was always my schedule, wasn't on call.
Right.
I've been on call since 2013. So if I wasn't on call, it would be a lot easier. It would be a 6 a.m. start.
Okay.
One of the things we're finding with our laying hens is we have one that really likes to lay her egg probably around 6:30 in the morning. So if you go out there at 6:45, it's already on the ground. And so you've got to get in there before 6:30 to lower. So that on the boxes that we have that we allow them to lay their eggs in, we use a metal box, a nesting box. They go in and it actually has a roll-away tray. So when they lay the egg actually rolls into an enclosed box that keeps it clean. Again, to meet some regulations, we have to ensure that they're clean. We can't use eggs off the ground, et cetera. So we use these nesting boxes. Well, it has a roost on it, and we close the roost at night to ensure that the birds don't get used to sleeping in there. Because if they sleep in there, then they crap in there, and it just becomes a big mess. So we have to get out first thing in the morning and drop the roost bar so the chicken can get in, lay the egg, because if they lay the egg on the ground, we can eat it.
Right.
We can't sell it. So that's usually part of it. So we usually do the brooder first, and then Carter and George have been really good about going out and doing the eggs. It's kind of, I've told Carter, like, the eggs can kind of be her thing, get her
Very
involved
nice.
in it, which is fine now. We have 17. They're just starting to lay because of wintertime. So she goes out in the evening, she gets her 9 or 10 eggs and comes back when we're running 100 eggs. a day.
Sure,
She might not be quite as
Right.
enthused
Right,
about the work, but
Productivity
right now
might be not what you want.
Right now
yeah.
it seems to work pretty good.
Yeah.
But when we get into full swing,
Right.
so we will generally always have one batch of birds in the brooder.
Okay.
We will always have one batch of birds in the pasture. So we're talking usually about 80 birds in the brooder, 80 birds in the pasture. After July, we'll have probably 60 turkeys as well as our 80 birds in the pasture. The turkeys take a lot longer to run out. So, and then we'll have, for this season, we'll have 6 hogs as well. So it's brooder first, then from the brooder, we'll move water, feed the chickens, move water, feed the turkeys. The pigs are usually pretty good in the back because we can leave them. They don't move every day. It's usually on our ground. It's about every 7 days that we need to move them. So that cuts down a little bit of the time. But when we have to move them, we have to move the water. So it's drain the water, use the tractor, move the water over to the next paddock, and then move the feeder over, move the hogs over. Sometimes, depending on how things are, again, we grow them in the woods, but we've thinned out a lot of the woods.
Okay.
So we're working on a silvopasture where we're getting tree cover / undergrowth of grasses and everything. So what we're hoping to do is get those grasses to grow up a little bit more. So sometimes what we'll do is, like, the day before we move them, we'll come in and broadcast seed down and allow the pigs to walk on it, push it down into the ground, which then leaves me, I don't have to go out and rake it and other things. Then we can move on. So it all depends on where we are in that, looking at the pasture, deciding, okay, well, today we need to move the birds twice a day.
So the days are very fluid. There's
a general process behind it, but yeah, very fluid.
Interesting. So you have, obviously, like, you have the farm operation, which is intense in itself, but then you also have this very, like, mission-centric side of the whole operation. What is, like, if you could pick one goal, what's, like, the one goal you would hope to accomplish through all this? We can edit out whatever pause you need to think about the answer to that.
Yeah. I think the one goal is to provide nutrient-dense, healthy food to the underserved communities in Baltimore.
Okay.
To start.
Nice.
And then be able to build this model to the point where we can take it other places.
Nice.
So when we really thought about the nonprofit at the beginning, one of our goals was we were going to be a farm partnership where we moved that. We were partnering with farms up and down the East Coast or wherever it was in the country to say, okay, you're part of this farm partnership. You're going to work your farm the same way. You're going to raise your animals. You're going to hire the same people, et cetera. We're kind of taking that model, except for instead of using other people's farms, we're looking at saying, hey, let's do this here and let's go establish a farm somewhere else.
Right.
And that's probably a lot of my trust issues coming into it, where I just don't trust anybody else to do it the way that I'm going to do it. So if I just go do it myself, we can move on. But I would love in 10 years to have, people running the farm here and moving on to another place to establish another farm and go from there.
Nice.
Is there anybody that you need to talk to in order to get, like, who? I guess we started talking about the issues with especially Baltimore City, getting into Baltimore City and doing this. Who do you need? Like, let's shout them out. Let's try to get a meeting, right? Why not?
I don't know who.
We're just going to tag the mayor. We'll tag all the city council members.
I don't really know.
Right.
Essentially, I need to change the existing law.
Right.
So, one, I need to get access the one property that we would like, and again, because we're livestock farming, I can't take a row home property and go, hey, I'm going to throw 10 chickens on here. It's not efficient. Now, we found a 50-acre piece of property down near Cherry Hill that is owned by the city. So it'd first be, how do we get access through a long-term lease with the city for that property? And then second would be, so that would be the first hurdle. The second hurdle would be, how do we get either an exemption or the current policy changed so that we can raise livestock in the city? They're the first two big hurdles we have to get over. We can't really even plan on anything else until we get the hurdles. And then, a 50-acre piece of property with the infrastructure and stuff we need, then we're looking at some serious financial input to get in there. I think we're probably a couple years down the road from that, but and I know from working in government that, if I don't start it now, it'll be 30 years before, and 15 administrations before we get anything changed. So, it's one of those things, and it's another part of the business side of it is keeping that big picture and realizing like this is where we need to get to, but still being able to focus on all those little things up to it. Because it could be really easy to go, oh yeah, we're going to work on this. Mm-hmm. Well, if I work really good and I get everything established to do this, but I haven't sold anything or I haven't produced a good product between now and then it doesn't really do me any good to be like, hey, this is great. I got this farm. It's established and I don't know how to grow anything, or I can't grow anything on it. So, I don't really know the answer to that. Yeah. I'd love to, if there's someone down there that wants to start the dialogue, I'm more than willing to talk on the phone and figure out where it goes from here. I'm not opposed to if the city wants to provide a grant to start something, then we'll start it early. Yeah. Right. But
well, I mean, listen, we're putting it out. There's this platform here, so we'll see who sees this and what we can do, and I think it's needed. Yeah. I don't think anybody can argue that what you're trying to do is needed, especially in Baltimore City. So
yeah, definitely.
So, awesome.
Cool.
I appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, man.
And we'll put all the contact information on the site or on the post. For you, right? Yeah. Uh-huh. Cool, man. Thanks for coming down.
Cool. Thanks
for having me.
Best of luck. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right, man. See you. Hey, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to listen to the podcast.
To listen to fucking Mike Tyson.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to listen to the podcast.
Make sure you follow us on social media. Check us out on searchbemore.com and subscribe to the podcast. And all future content is available to you.
Yes.
If you subscribe
to it.
Thank you.
Good job. Bye.